Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Taylor Combeluzier, a mining analyst at Red Cloud Securities. Today's webinar focuses on World Copper Limited, which is currently focused on the exploration and development of its two copper porphyry projects, Cristal and Escalonas in Chile. It is also in the process of completing the acquisition of the Zonia copper oxide project in Arizona by way of a business combination with Cardero Resources. Today, I have with me on the webinar Nolan Peterson, CEO at World Copper. The format of today's webinar will be comprised of two parts. In the first part, Nolan will provide an update on World Copper, including an overview of the company's projects and what investors have to look forward to in the near term. In the second part, we'll take your questions live, so please send in your questions via the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. And I'll note you can type them in at any point throughout the webinar. To start, we'll handle the disclosures and then get into the presentation. So for World Copper, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I would direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of the World Copper corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. And we note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for World Copper specific disclosures. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nolan to update you on World Copper and what you have to look forward to at the company.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you everyone for joining me today. I'm going to share my screen here 1 second so that you should be able to see our presentation now. As Taylor mentioned, my name is Nolan Peterson. I'm the CEO of World Copper. I've been the CEO for the last 4 months, and it's been an exciting time for me and the organization. And as a bit of an introduction, my background is engineering. I'm a process metallurgist, so I've worked in mining for my entire career. The first 5 years of my career, I worked for a company called S&C Lavalin, engineering firm, worked with clients such as Barrick, Newmont, and Rio Tinto. And as a junior engineer, I gained a lot of experience understanding how projects are developed by major players and value is unlocked for shareholders. After that, I moved to a company called New Gold, which you may be familiar with, and I worked on the Kamloops New Afton Copper Gold project, and we worked to bring that project through construction and then into commissioning and operations. After that, I joined New Gold's corporate project development team, and I worked on the Blackwater and Rainy River projects, where I worked on feasibility studies for those projects, and ultimately the Rainy River project, which was over $1 billion capex, was taken into construction and then into operations. I also have a strong financial background. I have a CFA charter and an MBA. For the last 5 years, I've been in corporate finance and mining, working in accounting, finance, long-term planning and strategy, liquidity management. I bring a development background to World Copper that differentiates us from a lot of junior exploration companies. We're looking to develop assets such as our Escalonas project and the Zonia project. I will discuss both of these in a second. We also have on our management team, Marcelo Awad is our executive director in Chile. He is an experienced executive who was the CEO of Antofagasta, highly respected in Chile. He took Antofagasta from a $4 billion company to a $20 billion company. Our chairman, Henk van Alphen, he put the company together and has found the people such as myself to take us to the next level. He has a long history in mining, has had success building companies like Corriente Resources and International Tower Hills from very small beginnings such as World Copper into a very large players, which we expect to be. We also have a gentleman named Krzysztof Napierla, who we recently hired in Chile as our general manager in Chile, and he comes to us from KGHM and KGHM International, where he spent the better part of a decade working on developing their assets. So for the last few years, he's been the general manager in Chile and the general manager of the Frankie operations for them. So this is a very experienced individual who comes to us from a major company as well, and it should be an indication of the story that we have at World Copper and the prospects for development. We also have some stellar geologists such as Patrick Burns and John Drobe on our team who are very experienced in South America. Patrick Burns was involved in the discovery of Escondida, which is of course the world's largest copper mine right now, producing over 5% of the world's copper. That was many decades ago. I like to talk a little bit about the macro demands for copper. I think that everyone on this call is probably at least a fair bit familiar with it. We expect the demand for copper to be growing tremendously in the next few years. Many analysts expect the same. Most of this driven by electrification of and the greenification of the economy, the shift to electric vehicles, the shift to westernized infrastructure, power, and housing supplies. You can see here a chart from Goldman Sachs that shows a significant deficit of copper projected by the end of 2030, where supply is just not expected to meet up with demand to satisfy the world's hunger for copper. We are looking to develop assets that will hit that window and allow us to generate free cash flow for our shareholders very quickly. I like to show this stat here. A lot of people think that, you know, as we move to a green economy, electric vehicles, you ask people what elements are in there, they'll say lithium, manganese, you know, carbon fibers, lightweight futuristic technologies, but they will probably be a bit surprised to learn that there's 3 times as much copper in an electric vehicle as there is in a gasoline vehicle. And there's actually 10 times more copper by weight in a vehicle than there is lithium in a vehicle, so in an electric vehicle. So there is a tremendous demand for copper. Copper will always be with us as we grow, as the world's economy grows, and as we shift our economy. Copper has a very strong component of that, and that's why we're investing in copper right now. We have 2 major assets in Chile. They are the Cristal Project and the Escalonas Project. The Cristal Project is a project near the Peruvian border in northern Chile. For us, it's a little bit of a lower priority project. It has the potential to be a large-scale copper porphyry, though, but in this case, it would be what's called a buried deposit covered under a few hundred meters of cover. So that would require getting some drills up there and drilling through that cover in order to discover the resource that we believe is below. There have been major players working in the region, including BHP and a recent discovery at an adjacent property. Our geologists believe that following the pattern of the West Fisher Fault in Chile, which has spawned a lot of the world's largest copper mines, that Cristal is right in the prime location for the next big find. But because of that cover, it may have previously been missed. So that's something that we're going to focus on in the near future, but Escalonas is our priority right now, and we have some exciting news that we just put out last week about that. As a background on Escalonas, it is in the Santiago region of Chile. It's about 100 kilometers to the southeast of Santiago and 35 kilometers east of El Teniente, the world's largest underground copper mine. There are also mines in the region as well, owing to the West Fisher Fault. The main porphyry sits in an area with great road access, power, proximity to a major seaport, and there's even a gas pipeline crossing the property. To date, 25,000 meters of drilling have been carried out in 53 holes, and it gives us the resource that we have right now. Last Monday, we put out an updated resource statement for the Escalonas project. The total was 426 million tons of copper oxide ore at a grade of 0.37% for almost 3.5 billion pounds of copper in the ground. Again, I will reiterate that this is oxide copper, not sulfide copper. Our previous resource statement, which we produced last year, just had approximately the same amount of tonnage and grade, but as a sulfide project. As an oxide project, we believe that this project is much more compelling for development and will be a much more attractive option for moving this project forward. Just to give you guys an update or a little bit of a refresher on the difference between oxides and sulfides. The vast majority of the world's copper supply comes from sulfide flotation. Sulfides are found deep below oxide covers. As the sulfides move to the surface of the earth, they are oxidized by the surface groundwater. So they are larger deposits because they can go deeper under the ground, but they are significantly more expensive to develop. A large-scale sulfide project can cost on the order of 2 to 3 billion to develop, to say nothing of the exploration costs to truly understand it. That's owing to the great infrastructure costs as to crushing and grinding, large flotation tanks. They require more water, require more power, require more people, larger equipment. And of course, if you're using more water, you have larger tailing facilities that entails a longer permitting process. That gets you a 30% copper concentrate, which you put onto a boat, shipped to somewhere in Asia, typically where it's further smeltered, and it hides the kind of the pollution impact of that. And then the copper, the pure copper that they produce, is shipped back over to the West or wherever industrial processes use it. Copper oxide, by contrast, is a simple heap leach process where you just crush it, place it onto a leach pad, use sulfuric acid in a recirculating loop, and then you extract pure copper with solvent extraction and electrowinning. Using electricity, it's a much cleaner process, 100% pure copper. You use up to 4 times less water per pound, no tailings facility, and an easier permitting process. You can get an oxide project off the ground for 500 to 600 million, certainly under $1 billion. So when we go back to our resource for Escalonas, this project as an oxide project is a large scale, I should say as a sulfide project, is a large scale, low grade, bulk tonnage, low margin operation that at the resource that we put out last year would not be feasible, would require additional drilling to prove out a larger size. And then we could start talking about how we would develop it. As an oxide project, this project is a large scale, moderate to high grade deposit with very attractive margins and a low initial capital cost. I like to show this slide as well. I'll just skip that back a bit. You can look at this yourself later as well. These are 4 heap leach copper oxide projects in Chile right now, run by major players like Codelco, Glencore, Anglo American. You can see that the copper grades that they have in these operations are lower than the Escalonas project, and the tonnages for the Escalonas project as it exists right now is right within the range for these major players and their mines that are currently in operations. We believe that that will now put Escalonas on the map for attention from larger players in the industry. As a project right now, the Escalonas resource would be the largest, one of the largest, if not the largest, copper oxide project in development in Chile at the moment. So that just gives you an idea of the scale we're dealing with. I will show you the claims block for Escalonas. Everything to date, 25,000 meters, has been drilled within that orange circle there. Immediately to the south of that, we have a supergene target, which we call the Mancha Amarilla. To the northeast, we have 3 copper porphyry targets, which have similar geophysical characteristics as the main Escalonas resource and the potential to be larger based on the volumes of materials involved. The main resource, you can see on the left there, on the north side of that map, all the drill holes that have been drilled are on the map there. You can see there has been nothing drilled in the Mancha Amarilla. We believe that the Mancha Amarilla is simply an extension of a larger resource. So basically the previous explorer ran up to the edge there and then stopped. And so you can see in the foreground, that's the existing resource. And then in the background is the extension. It shares the same coloration, the same surface characteristics, the same geophysical characteristics. If we can prove that this lithocap is an extension, we have the potential to double this resource in size based on the volumes involved. That would entail a 700 to 800 million ton operation, and that would be certainly the largest copper oxide project in development in Chile at the moment. We also have a material on the skarn, which flanks the main resource. The skarn is a higher grade copper oxide ore mineralization, and that has the potential to increase the grades overall of this resource. A couple weeks ago, we put out a surface sampling program, which had some very compelling numbers. Focusing on the east skarn here, you can see some traverses. The surface sampling here is executed to help us support and target drill holes for the upcoming drill program, which we have planned for December of this year to start in Chile, which is their summer. And one of the traverses for this east skarn produced a sample of 17.4% copper. That would be native copper just in the field existing on the surface. It's certainly a testament to the endowment of copper in this resource that has been previously undiscovered and that we are in the process of proving out. So our plans for Escalonas are to drill that ridge, as I mentioned, to prove that this is an extension, prove the additional mineralization from the skarn material, and then we will also be concurrently looking at starting a preliminary economic assessment on the existing resource, because in and of itself, it is large enough to get started on developing that and understanding that the value that's inherent there. We also have the three other targets to the northeast, as I mentioned. They are a little bit of a lower priority. The infrastructure access there would require helicoptering drills up into there, but that will be something we will focus on once we have a better handle of what we're truly dealing with at Escalonas itself, the main resource. I'll move on to the Zonia Project. The Zonia Project is a project that we are acquiring through a merger with Cardero Resources. The Zonia Project is in Arizona, another attractive mining jurisdiction similar to Chile. It's in an area where there's a number of mines that have been previously in operation or are currently in operation. And this mine itself was in operations in the 1960s and 1970s, and it's produced in its history 60 million pounds of copper. I think that's an important thing to note when you're looking at a resource company, especially a junior. What type of assets do they have? Do they just have a land package and the hope of a high-grade drill result, or do they actually have a resource? This, not only do we have a resource, but a resource that has produced copper in the past. There's no doubt there's copper there and that it can be extracted. The Zonia project was shut down in the 70s, though, because of low prices. It's changed hands a number of times as different operators have tried to restart it. It now finds itself into our possession soon as we finalize the transaction. The transaction with Zonia or with Cardero will be a 40% stock issuance from World Copper, and then we will go forward as a joint entity. We're also planning to raise money to fund a feasibility study at Zonia and as well to fund the drill programs at Escalonas and the PEA that are required to advance that. So we are not just sitting around waiting for drill results to come back. We are advancing development of these assets, and we are adding value to shareholders along the way. I will talk a bit more about Zonia. It is 100 miles to the northwest of Phoenix. It's in an area of good infrastructure. There's easy access. There's a road running nearby it, a highway rather, a new power line, as well as sufficient groundwater on site to start operations once we are able to. The property itself has had 50,000 meters of drill work historically. Everything that's been drilled to date is in the southwest corner of this map on the claims block there. The advantage here for Zonia, the silver bullet, if you will, for this project, is that all of those drill results and the resource sit on what's called private land in Arizona, which we believe and our understanding is that we can bring this project from permitting and then into construction and operation within 3 to 4 years from the start of engineering, so start of the feasibility study. That is pretty much tomorrow in the mining industry, so very quickly we can start to generate positive cash flows from this operation, which I'll discuss in a second. But to the northeast of this, we have a potential expansion target that has been previously undrilled and unsampled, so this is something that we're looking at getting some drills up there and proving that this deposit actually extends, which would make it even more compelling. In 2018, a preliminary economic assessment for Zonia was carried out. At the time, they used a $3 copper price. The initial capital was $200 million. The after-tax NPV was $192 million. At a price of, say, around $4 copper, which is closer to today's spot price, the after-tax NPV is $450 million. The after-tax first-year free cash flow is $150 million, putting for initial payback at just a little bit over a year. At $5 copper or $6 copper, which many of us hope and expect that at some point in the near future we will be at, such as analysts such as Goldman Sachs are projecting that, the margins for this project will be incredible, and the amount of free cash it'll generate will be significant, enough to fund Escalonas and other ventures that World Copper is choosing to execute on. The operating costs for this project, again, as I mentioned, oxide projects are much less expensive to operate than a sulfide project. The PEA operating costs for this project were $1.40 to $1.50 per pound, so very attractive. That owes to the low strip ratio as well as the low operating costs. So also this project has a 1-to-1 strip ratio, which is quite attractive. I will finish with some pictures of Zonia. In the top left, you can see the leach pad from the former production. And then in the bottom, you can see the pit itself. It's already been pre-stripped by the previous operator. So the pit is ready to go that contributes to the lower initial capital costs as well, and certainly helps to contribute to the lower operating costs on the strip ratio going forward. You can see some of the infrastructure in place as well, which is ready to be upgraded and expanded when we're ready to take this mine into production. I'll talk a little bit about our share structure. We have two major shareholders at the moment, Wealth Minerals and Gold Springs Resources. Wealth Minerals, a little bit over 2 weeks ago, announced a purchase of Gold Springs Resources shares at a 33-cent share price, which makes Wealth Minerals a 49% shareholder once the deal closes. We also have 10% insiders and associates who aren't selling anytime soon ownership, which leaves 40% of our shares free floating. We have 41 million shares outstanding. Once we complete the transaction with Cardero Resources, they will receive about 29 million shares, and we'll end up with 73 million shares outstanding, which we will go forward and do our financing for. We will also be potentially doing a financing in the near future to fund initial start of work on Escalonas and Zhonya. That is the World Copper story. I'm happy to take any questions now that you may have. It's an exciting time. If you look at our current market capitalization, I think that you will see that it's really the ground floor, and it's a great time to get involved.
Great, thanks a lot, Nolan. So we will now turn to the Q&A portion of the webinar, and just a reminder to everyone on the line that you can type in your questions at any point. So we have had a couple come in. Maybe the first one to touch on, it tied into kind of what you were just saying at the end with the market cap, under 25 million seems undervalued considering the assets. I guess what's your view on that? And
yeah,
run with that.
I think that well, certainly once we sign the definitive agreement with Cardero, a lot of the transaction risk for the merger will be alleviated. And also when we announced the fact that we were going to do a $10 million financing, I think it kind of put a little bit of an overhang on the share price, if we're being honest. People know we're expecting to do financing, then they just wait for that rather than buying it in the open market. Can't blame them. But then also it is the summer season, so it's been a pretty slow. But at the same time, since I've joined, our share price is up about 60%. So we're on the right path, and I'm certainly happy about that. But we definitely expect us to be going up a lot higher and in the near future for sure.
Great. Okay. Another question came in wondering about on the exploration side, just what are the next steps for Escalonas and the northern targets?
Yes, so I'll go back to my presentation. So for Escalonas, our first priority, and we are planning a drill program, is along that ridge there, and that putting 7 holes along that ridge, 300 meters deep into the supergene blanket or the lithocap, that will prove that we have the same mineralogy extending from the top of Escalonas to the bottom, from north to south. So that, once we get below 300 meters, that's 2,100 meters in total. We also have, we're permitting for 5,000 meters, so that'll leave us some room. We either continue into the sulfide layer if we see impressive mineralization, or we just change the direction of the holes and try to pick up more of the oxide. I think we'll tend to do the latter. I want us to focus on the oxides just because they're much better development option, much cleaner, much easier to progress on. And we're at the side of a mountain here. The mining costs for an oxide project are quite advantageous since gravity is on our side. So yeah, I really want to focus on the oxide layer. That'll be our drill focus there. The Escalonas northern targets will probably be a 2 to 3 year from now time frame. We really want to focus on the Mancha Maria and then the skarn at the Escalonas, and maybe even better understand the main resource itself. But once we have a very large resource established there, we'll turn our focus to the northeast, get some samples up there, get some drills up there, and then when you really think about it, if we add the resources here, this could be a complex that could be producing copper for easily 50+ years, even with just its oxide potential.
Right. And the 5,000 meters, would that cover just the southern supergene area, or would that also be used in the main area as well?
That's just the southern supergene area and a little bit of the skarn as well.
Okay. Just in terms of the geology a little bit, is the porphyry upright, or is it tilted? Do you know?
I actually don't know if it's upright or tilted. I don't know the definition of that. I have to refer to my geologist for that.
No problem.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, another question. Just wondering if you've sampled the northern targets.
We have surface sampled the northern targets. Those results are pending as well. They will be coming out in the near future. They are looking as good as the southern, as the Skarn and Mancha Maria targets that we put out.
Mm-hmm.
There is no 17% sample on the northern targets, though, I will say.
Right. Okay. In terms of, so obviously with the upcoming, contemplated financing and having that, some of that being used for the drilling at Escalonas, are you looking to get drilling this year, or would this be a next year type of?
Well, it's this season, so it would be starting in December, spilling into next year, and that's of course because Chile. That's the summer in Chile, so it is next year, but it's not a year from now.
Right. Perfect. Okay. 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 So switching back to Zonia, just wondering a little bit about we talked about the jurisdiction in the presentation. What kind of infrastructure is on site, and what kind of access does the project have?
There is. It's not a traditional brownfield project where there's operations from like 5-10 years ago that you're looking to restart. The last time there was any real operation on this site was in the 70s. So the infrastructure in place is offices and trailers and stuff like that. It would be a new build type of setup. You can see the existing infrastructure that is just caretaker operations over the years. There is access to the site. There's a highway, I believe, right pretty close to the site, and then road access from that. So it's pretty accessible, and the infrastructure is good, including a recently upgraded substation, as you can see, 7.5 kilometers from the mine entrance.
Okay. And then with the exploration potential at Zhonya, particularly with the molybdenum target up at the northern end, is that target drill ready, or would it need additional sampling and to kind of land on targeting?
It would be drill ready. There was a permitting plan in place and submitted and approved for drilling of the northeast anomaly. It was never carried out on. So we believe, our Cardero believes, that it's simply a matter of pulling that permit off the shelf and going back and saying, hey, can we do this now? And then they say yes. So it is ready to go. We would probably start with a sampling program just to start to identify some targets. But it is something that we'll be looking forward to. I would say, though, that proving that extension there is secondary to getting the main project off and running, because that target sits on federal and state land, which would require a different permitting regime, but does give a very good story for an extension or expansion once the main resource is in production.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And is that BLM land, or is it Forest Service?
I think it's a mixture of both.
Okay. Another question came in, going back to Escalonas. How does Escalonas, the deposit, compare to the Mara Mare deposit?
To Marimaca? Yeah, that's a good question. So Marimaca, I've been reviewing their PEA, obviously, as a benchmarking exercise. Their PEA mine plan, so not necessarily the resource, their mine plan had 137 million tons at a grade of 0.47% copper processed. So significantly smaller in terms of tonnage, but also higher grade operation than Escalonas. When you take a look at their PEA, you can do a benchmarking exercise for yourself if you are so inclined, and just start using some of their costs and put together a plan. You can see that they're currently trading at 350-ish million, and we're currently trading at 20-ish million. So there's a great deal of room for improvement, which you can understand why I'm so optimistic and aggressive to get a PEA out for Escalonas soon. They produced their PEA last September, so you could say that they're maybe a year ahead of us at this stage.
Great. Okay. I think those are all the questions that we've had come in. So I think we'll wrap up there then, unless there's any others that attendees have before we call it. Give them a second there. Okay. Yeah, I think that's it. We'll conclude there. So I would like to thank Nolan from World Copper for taking the time to host the webinar today with Red Cloud Securities, and thank you very much for everybody on the line that tuned in with us this afternoon.
Thank you very much, everyone.